Good afternoon. I'm Adam Glick. I'm a technical product manager with Microsoft, and I want to thank you all for spending your afternoon with me and inviting me out here to New Zealand to speak to you today. These guys are helping setting up some of the demo stuff that we're doing. We're having some display PC challenges here, so just kind of ignore them while they plug that in. The first part of this talk, I'm going to go over some of the overview issues anyway, so that won't be necessary. Can we take it to the first slide? So, went over who I am. Oh, you want to? There we go. Thank you. So, sorry for some of the technical difficulties. Today, I want to talk to you all about Outlook and about what Outlook means, not only just as Outlook itself as we think about it today, but also about how we envision Outlook for the future and what it will mean to you and all of your users. Do you want to do kind of a quick check of how many of you here are IT pros who administer Office environments? Gotcha. So that's most of the crowd. Good, because I want to talk to you about what the new Outlook is going to mean to all of you, what it's going to mean to your users, how we thought about the changes that we've done to the product, and what we've done across the experiences that people are going to have for that. So I'll talk a little bit about what Outlook means, talk a little bit, I don't want to make it too much of a philosophy lecture, but a little bit about the philosophy behind how we built it, why we built it, so you not only understand what we built, and I'll take you through a pretty extensive demo of the products and what's in them and how we think about them, but also why we did what we did and how we think about the future. So as you think about the communications for your organizations, not only today, but for the next 5 to 10 years, you can see how Outlook and the vision for Outlook fits into how you think about strategic communications within your organization. The second half of this then, of course, is actually showing it to you. And so I'll spend a lot of time sitting in the product itself and showing you, where these philosophical decisions that we've made and all the investments that we've made in terms of development, where those show up in terms of how people are actually going to use the product. What does it actually mean to do these things? How are people actually going to get benefit? How are you going to have a easier to manage environment? How are you going to think about how people communicate in the future? So when I think about Outlook overall, really think about Outlook as two things. It is a suite of products and services. It's not just a single application today, and it is the hub of digital communications. And I know that sounds like kind of a lot of gibberish, so let me unpack it a little bit. It breaks into two things. So one, when I say a suite of products and services, what that means is that Outlook is really more than just the desktop application that you think of today. If I say Outlook to most people today, most people think of the PC application that sits there as part of Office. It's the yellow icon they click in, they go and they get their email, their contacts, and their calendar. Is that a pretty fair representation? Sorry, I'm one of these people that loves the hand-raising piece of things. I apologize to all of you who don't like the interactive stuff. It just helps me connect, helps me feel better, helps me understand who you folks are. So when you think about that piece of it, what we've really done, how many of you saw Outlook.com launched? How many have an Outlook.com mail address? Awesome, and some of this stuff is going to look familiar. I won't spend any time in Outlook.com today, but you're going to see the similarities in experience and a lot of the philosophical things that I talk about today. You're going to see how what's in Outlook.com also very much aligns with what you're going to see in both Outlook web app that I'm going to spend a lot of time showing you today, as well as the Outlook, the full rich desktop application. And so I talk about that suite, and it's important to understand that there is all these Outlook experiences, and that's because people think of Outlook, we want them to have the experience across those things. So when people call up help desk, how many people had Outlook 2010 and Exchange 2010? 2007? 2003? Anyone go back further? 2000, 5, some of the old folks? So some of you may even remember things like Exchange Web Access before it was Outlook Web Access. And if you remember in those days, and even if you go back not too far, 2010 was pretty good. Before that, in 2007, there was a pretty remarkable difference between what you got in Outlook Web Access at the time and what you got in the Outlook desktop application. And the reason for that was pretty clear. There were two separate groups within Microsoft that built those two products. And so you didn't have a consistent experience. What that meant is if you had a user environment where people were connecting in, you had to worry about how you trained people to handle both of those. If people were using an Outlook Web Access environment, then they were going to have different questions. They were going to see things differently in their environment. How they communicated, what they were able to do, and what they weren't able to do was actually a pretty substantially different set of things that you had to train people for, both on your help desk and then your actual end users. And then if you look at 2010, they became a lot more similar. And what you're going to see today is they become even more similar, and that's about making it easier for you folks. So when users go and they access these things, whether they're going and accessing on a web browser of whatever web browser they choose to use. We support a whole range of them, or whether they're using the Outlook application, or wherever they go with the Outlook experience that they have, even to things like Windows Phone, they're going to have a consistent set of experiences. So you can train users once, and they can have one set of experiences where they go and do what they want. So the second part of that statement that I said was we had the suite of all these things and understanding that it's a number of different things, and I'll show you some of those today. The other was what's listed here, which is the hub of digital communications. Now, Outlook is almost synonymous with email today, and I think that's great. But when I think about how people are communicating, there's a lot of different communications means that people are using in organizations right now. How many of you are using instant messaging? Anybody use SMS for work-based communications? A few folks. SMS, most people, I'll spare you the whole list because Outlook actually supports a huge list of communications mediums. But when you think about things like RSS feeds and people bringing in feeds, whether those feeds are external, whether those feeds are internal through things like SharePoint, if people are integrating things like Link and instant messaging, whether they're moving on to video, voice and presence, all of those pieces start to come together. And what happens is if you have all these different communications pieces and people are communicating separately, what you end up is silos of communication. And sometimes people are okay with that, but those become a real problem when you have to do things like do a legal hold or legal search, or users want to actually find the information they're working on. So when I think about a digital hub, I think about one place that people go, and when they go into Outlook to be able to get a hold of all their communications. I kind of think of it as they have one place to create, consume. In a corporate environment, I think of compliance, how they comply, and how they search. And so if they've got one place to do all the different communications things that they do, and if Outlook is that place to go do that, then that makes it very valuable to users and a lot easier for administrators. You don't have different servers and different services, and you don't have to worry about how you access each of these pieces of data, how you keep track of them all. And a lot of this ties in to a concept that people have probably heard again and again. How many people have heard consumerization of IT? How many people are sick of hearing that term? It's an incredibly overused term, and I'm going to offer you a way to think about it that may be similar, maybe a little different than what you've heard. I hear a lot of people talk about it in the mobile device space, and they talk about the consumerization of IT as people bringing their phones into work. People heard a lot of that? Yes? No? See some heads nodding. I hear a lot. I work on Exchange ActiveSync, and so I hear a lot of that, and people bring it up, and that's the main way. The one thing that people want, first and foremost, when they're mobilizing an organization, and even before they were mobilizing, even when you were giving people laptops and they were connecting in, you were using Outlook Anywhere to connect in, it's access to messaging. It's the key workload for people, and when you think about consumerization of IT, that's the key workload and the focus that people are doing there. And what I'll offer you today is the thought that when you think about consumerization of IT, it is that people are bringing separate devices. They're bringing them into the environment. They want access to the servers that you're controlling within your environment. But what's really happening is that the shift is switching from IT controlling people's experiences and the data to users choosing their experience and IT managing the data. And this is one of the things that we thought a lot about when we were building this generation of the Outlook products is how do we make sure that you folks in IT have control over the data, that you can protect the data, that you can make sure that you've protected the information that's within your organization, within the tools that we provide you, but also that we give people the experiences that they want to have. Because now people are going to make that choice. Your users may choose to use what you provide them on their desktop. And they may go home where they might have a PC, they might have a Mac, they might have a tablet, they might have a phone, and they're going to still want to access those pieces of information. And how do we make sure that we provide tools that not only those users in those contexts want to use, but they have an Outlook experience that you're going to be able to support, and that they have tools that enable you to protect the data that's within your organization. What happens when someone wants to access a confidential email or an attachment, or they're sending things around the organization or even in and out of the organization that may or may not have, say, proprietary information in that? How do you protect that information, and do you have the tools to make it easy for your users to stay within the rules that you've set for your organization? And we spent a lot of time thinking about that to give you the controls to be able to do that, and I'm going to demo some of those things today as well. So when you think about that whole piece of it, that's kind of the two pieces of that, of the, we're thinking about a broad spectrum of where do you put all these things? What are the experiences that people have across their devices and across their browsers? And also then, what do people do in terms of communication? How do we make this a hub for communication? So rather than you ending up with lots of different silos of communications in an organization, you can create a hub for all of your users to have one place to communicate. Going along with that, I guess I'll touch one more thing before I go on, is that there's a lot of talk about what social means in an organization. I hear a lot of discussion of social, and it could be feeds, it could be Facebook, it could be Twitter. There's lots of discussions around that, and about building Outlook as a platform. And how many people have ever installed a plugin for Outlook? I'm going to guess almost everyone here. How many people have written a plugin for Outlook? Probably very few. Fair number. So writing a plugin for Outlook historically has been quite a development task. You have to know COM, you have to go in there. For those of you who have been developer, I used to be a developer, it's not for the faint of heart. And it's a very powerful tool, and there's very good reasons to do that. And we thought about how can we make that easier for developers to be able to extend the model. I won't tell you that I know every kind of communications medium that people are going to do in the future. That would be a fool's errand. What I can tell you is I want to, and we hope that we've built ourselves a platform that when people build additional pieces of information, different ways that communications come into people's inboxes, that's available, and that people can make that available within that context. If you take a look at, whether you have, say, a Cisco Unity system, if you're doing voicemail, or obviously if you're using Exchange for your voicemail, you can bring voicemail into the inbox, or whether you're doing SMS either through the built-in SMS providers, through Exchange, through third parties like SMS General, whatever it is, that we create a place where people can build all that information into one place so people can have that one place. And the real focus around that, why I bring up the concept of social, is because you have all these different communications mediums. And when you think about social, I don't have a lot of time to dig into this today, but I'm happy to talk to any of you offline, I'd encourage you to think a little bit about the concept of social is really about easy. It's really about making things easier for people to do what they want to do. And this is one of our guiding principles when we think about how we build Outlook is we want to make things easier because the social contract has changed, right? I talk about users bringing their own devices into the workplace or connecting from home and connecting in. They're choosing experiences and they have expectations. They have expectations that it's going to have a look and feel that they like, that there's an aesthetic that matters, that there's a usability that matters to them, and they expect that they're going to be able to just do something and the experience is going to be intuitive. And so that's a big shift in terms of think of like, before it was, software came with manuals, and then it didn't come with manuals, but you had online help that people could look at, and then you had people going and doing trainings. And now the expectation is I can just get a piece of software. And I can go take that piece of software and install it. And whatever I want to do with it, I should just be able to figure it out. It should just make sense to me. And so we've spent a lot of time in this release thinking about how do we make Outlook an experience that exposes some of the incredibly powerful and rich scenarios that we've enabled and making them really easy for users to do what they want to do. Because at the end of the day, I want people to be able to communicate freely and simply. It's about conveying communication in the pursuit of productivity. That's my focus. So when I talk about the breadth of Outlook, you're all obviously, I'm going to hope, familiar with Outlook, the desktop app. Yes, that seems kind of a gimme. If you're not, I'm impressed that you're here. In that case, I can only assume it's because you love my American accent. But when I think about beyond that, how many of you have deployed Outlook Web App or Outlook Web Access, depending on your version of Exchange? It's a good number. How many of you have people connecting in through mobile devices, probably through Exchange ActiveSync? Okay. So a good number of you, and I notice there's still a fair number, probably about a third, that haven't taken that step yet, and I suspect that you probably will in the next number of years. But when we think about it, the connection of Outlook and Exchange and providing those Outlook experiences, again, from everything from the Windows Phone all the way up through the browser, and we support all the major browsers today, to the rich desktop, and obviously there's Outlook for Mac. Again, creating that suite of experiences, and we've really put a focus on making sure that it's available on all the experiences people are going to have. Now, the big shift here, I mean, being on the web is nothing new. We've done that for years. We created Ajax. Being on the rich desktop ever since Microsoft Mail back in the day, that's not particularly new. And Exchange ActiveSync, we've been doing that for, what, almost 10 years now at this point. So the really big new thing is tablets. That's the big thing that's kind of taken the world by storm. How many of you have tablets in your organization today? How many of those are brought in by the users versus provided by the organization? Oh, interesting. Most of you have org provided. So we have that same thing at Microsoft. There's a ton of them. I have an office that's full of every tablet you can think of as I play with all these things. And that was a big switch when we thought about building this generation because tablets are fundamentally different than how you think about your standard PC. And the big difference, of course, is the touch screen. When you think about a touch screen, you think about a tablet, there's lots of things that you may have grown accustomed to that don't particularly work well. Say right click. There is no right click on a tablet. Now, people have come up with some clever things about, touching one place on a screen and touching others, a number of paradigms. We did a lot of exploration around what's the right way to create user interactions that do things like that. Other things, and I'll show you some of them today, are on the desktop client, are things like hover. What happens when you hover over something? There's no hovering on a tablet. You're either touching it or you're not. And some people have done some stuff where it tries to sense where you are, but those aren't very commonplace. And when you think about designing something, you have to design it for what everybody has, not a very small niche of things. And so you've got some big differences that happen. And you'll see with the redesign that we've done of the product, we've actually made some really big changes around making sure that these things can be touch-friendly. And when I say touch-friendly, I'm talking about across the Outlook web app experience, because you may be in a browser and you may be in a browser on your tablet, or you may be on a browser on a PC, or you may be on a Windows 8 device that has both, where you could be using a keyboard and a mouse, or you could be using a touch screen. And the same thing is true if you're using the Outlook client. And you're going to see that the Outlook client has actually been adapted quite a bit to make sure that you can not only use it the way that you always have, but also have the ability to go in and do touch actions on that. So with that, I will promise you that I will not kill you all today with death by PowerPoint, as they say. And so I want to spend probably as much time as I can. Let's see if this switches over. Demoing for most of the rest of the time today and actually showing you the product. So I said I wanted to spend a little time talking about the philosophy of it, and we'll get to some of the things again when we talk about some of the particular experiences. But I do want to really show you the product, because that's really the hero of all this. So here you're looking at the new Outlook experience. How many have downloaded the preview and taken a look at it? Okay, so some of you have seen this. For a lot of you, this is new. Don't worry, I'm going to go through a lot of the different pieces of this, so you're going to see a lot of the different parts and what we put into it. And you're going to see where that philosophy that I was talking about, how we think about things, about making this a hub for communications, about putting everything there, about making this easy to access, really comes through. So one of the first things that you will notice in these experiences is they're very much Windows 8 styled. Now, I've done something particular in the current mailbox that you're looking at, and that's I've done a lot of things to the view that you're seeing right here to make it look like the old Outlook experience. And I'm going to show you a bunch of the customizations that you can do, but one of the things that I want you to understand is some people have organizations or users that want to try the latest, that they want to tinker with everything. Other people are very change averse. Other people say, I like the experience that I have, or I don't have the budget to spend retraining people. Give me the great new features and experiences you have, but show me how to make it look and feel like the last Outlook experience, because this is going to be, it's a pretty radical departure if you take a look at it. Like I said, I did some of the tweaks here in order to kind of hide some of those pieces. But one of the things, how many here, this is a curious check, run Conversation View as their default? That's actually fairly common. We've got some data. We look at our users and sees about 10% of people use Conversation View. Inside Microsoft, it's about 30%. Here's some of our inside numbers. I'd encourage you to really give Conversation View a try. And the kind of easy way for me to get that across to you here is you can see an inbox here. So this I have sorted by date view, which is, let me guess, the rest of you use date view? Pretty safe bet? That tends to be what most of the other users tend to use. There's a few people that use others, but those are the big two that we see. So we take a look. This is sorted in date view. And so there's a ton of email messages that are in this box. And as you can see, it's a pretty sizable list. I tend to be a filer. I'm one of those people that puts everything into folders, and I've got 1,000 different folders on the side. Statistically, we find it's about evenly split of filers and pilers. Just some more interesting data for you. The other side of it that you'll see is the pilers that have mailboxes like this. My boss is like this. He has like 12,000 unread messages. It's just this massive amount of information. We create tools to support both. And we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we help you find the information that's important to you. Because this is another one of those big shifts that you're seeing. People are getting more and more information. I'm willing to bet that raise your hand if people are getting less email volume this year than they got last. Yeah. One guy. So I'd love to talk to you afterwards and understand that situation, actually. But I hear a lot of people talk about, email's going to go away. The reality is we just see volumes increasing and increasing. When people talk about other forms of communication, remember I talked about it being a digital hub and other forms of communication coming in, whether you're getting it through feeds or whether you're getting it through a third-party service or IM that's plugging in, more communication is coming to people. And the problem is information overload. People get more and more information, and at a certain point they give up. They don't know what else to do. Now, different people are in various states of that. I get about 450 messages a day, which means I've been here for 3 days and my inbox is hopelessly overloaded. By the time I get back to the States, I will probably do what we call declaring email bankruptcy and simply email everyone that says, if it's really important, send it to me again. But this is a real problem, and if you think, I'm betting that most of you in this crowd get at least a couple hundred messages a day, if not more. And if those volumes are increasing, how do we give you tools to help you manage that information? And we're doing a lot of work around that. Some of it will come out in this release, some of it we're actually planning for the future. But it's one of the things that we think about philosophically as one of the things we need to solve. Because I hear people talk about, oh, well, I use this other medium, so I'm on Twitter. I'm Mobile Glick, if anyone follows Twitter and likes to see what I'm tweeting about. But when people are like, I get contacted on Twitter and they're like, oh, Twitter's so much faster. And what I say to people is, think about when you first started using email. Or when you first, when you first got old enough, you moved out and you got your own address and you got that first letter. And you responded right away. Sure, because you only had one of them. Or direct messages I get on Twitter, and I can see I'm setting myself up here. I'm going to say this, all going to send me a direct message. I'm going to 25 of them when I get back. But I get direct messages maybe once a week. So I respond right away, and I had one person that he wrote, he was like, oh my God, the power of Twitter. The product manager for Outlook responded to me within 10 minutes of me posting this question. He's really excited. And I was talking to some other people, and I said, that's great, but realize the reason is, it's not that this medium is so much faster, it's that there's so much less data going through it. When you've got this new communication silo, and you're actually deciding to spend time within that area in that silo, and you're getting very few messages, it's real easy to stay on top of it. It's real easy to reply to it. That's the way email was when you probably first got an email address. And then more people got to know your email address. You had it for more years. You took on a new position or a position with more responsibility. You started getting more email. And then you got the flood. The difference with all these other communications mediums is simply they're just earlier on. Email is simply more mature. It's more advanced. We've gone farther with it. People use it and rely on it more. And that's why you need better tools. And that's why I think about when we bring those other pieces of information into Outlook and your Outlook experience, that we need to give you the tools to be able to sort through that and find the information that's really important to you. So back to this inbox. This inbox is full of all sorts of information. And the reason, like I said, the one thing, I'm going to change this from sorting by date to sort by conversation. So it's the same set of messages. There's no emails been deleted. We haven't gotten rid of anything. All I did is simply said, all the messages that are all part of the same conversation, put them together. And so rather than having a million different messages, how many people have done this where you get a mail that comes in and you're out, and so you reply to it right away. It's coming from the senior VP. And then you're reading through the rest of your mailbox and you get to another message where somebody already answered it, or worse yet, someone suggests what you suggested, and someone says, well, that's totally wrong. Has anyone had that? You are all far smarter and better than I then, because I've had that happen to me. And it just, I was just working my way through my email, catching up, and something from someone fairly senior in the organization, you want to make sure you get back to them. The whole point of Conversation View is to put it in context, because we as people, we don't have discrete forms of communication. I don't say one thing and then say something to someone else and just completely forget about what happened previously. We have a conversation. That conversation is ongoing. That happens in email the same way it happens in every other form of communication. And this puts it in context. So one thing you're going to see is that this list, even though it's all the same messages, is simply much shorter, because all it's done is put them all together. And so if there's something that I don't care about, like Pedro's talking about sports here. Okay, maybe I care about sport. Maybe this isn't that important to me in a work context. I can choose to read it or delete it, or this proposal we've got for Tailspin Toys. And so I can expand it out, and there's a set of conversations that people are having in this. Sometimes it gets really useful with things like, recollapse that, when people are talking about things that I don't particularly care about. You can see that there's lots of messages that are in this, and let's say that this isn't really important to me right now. So I can choose to do things like, how many people have ever used the ignore function? Anyone? So I can do something. So ignoring, I'll show you the cheat. So the ignore button is right up here, just for all those that are curious what it is. And what ignore really does is it just sets up a rule to automatically move it to the deleted items folder. So if there's a conversation, all of it just goes to the deleted items folder. And I say it's a rule because that means, let's say you've got one of these conversations where someone, they send out an email, and then, everyone's, replying, please remove me or whatever. We've all been on one of those. You can set ignore, and all the future messages that come in all get sent to the trash can. You don't have to keep deleting every one of those. And it happens at the server. So if you're on your mobile device, if you're on a web browser, you're all going to get that same experience. All that gets ignored. And it's going and deleting it. And of course, we do smart things. If you go to deleted items, you can right-click and you can choose to unignore it, which will put it back in your inbox. So if you accidentally did it, you didn't make any permanent decisions. So that's about kind of simplifying all these things. The other things you'll see with the simplification is we've tried to really kind of reduce the lines. We've given this Win8 style that I talked about, and we've worked on what we call, our designers said, a fierce reduction of elements. Basically, let's get rid of stuff that you're not going to be looking at. But Outlook is really powerful, but it has a ton of stuff on the screen because we wanted to show you a million different things that you could do. So in this case, what I've done is I happen to have pinned the ribbon bar there. And I did it just to make it look more like what you were used to when you saw previous versions of Outlook. But when you install Outlook, you're going to get a look that looks more like this. Now, the ribbon's still there. If you want to go and access anything, you just tap on disappear and it appears. But you know what? When I'm reading messages, I don't know that I care about that. And if I don't care about it, let's take it off the screen. Let's get rid of all that extra distraction, and let's let people focus on what's really important, which is the communication. And so in this case, we've put the communication front and center. Now there's a few buttons we put at the top, reply, reply all, forward, the things you're likely to do on the message. And we've gotten rid of the 1,000 other things that are up there that you may want to do, but those are really secondary things. They're not things you usually do on every message. They're things you normally make a concerted effort to go and change. And so we haven't gotten rid of it. We've just kind of minimized it. And if you want to, you can even minimize it even further, that if you go and you click this button right here, go into full screen mode, it all disappears. One of the reasons we've done this is when you think about all the different screen sizes that you have in devices today, everything from a netbook up to the 27-inch monitor you might have on your desk if you're really fortunate. It could be the 13-inch laptop monitor that I have. Could be this tablet that I have, but you're going to have lots of different experiences, and so making it easy for people to set the experience and the environment to the size of what they want was really important. And so we give you a lot of options, and these 3 dots just kind of indicate that. So you've got, again, the full menu just like you had before, but it collapses away, just making it easier for people to do things. You'll notice that we got rid of a bunch of the lines, too. When you take a look at this, in the old Outlook, you would see lines between every message. You would see lines dividing between every section of this, that there were lines everywhere. We said, what are those lines doing? Are those lines benefiting anyone, or is that just more visual noise? Because the real focus is, like I said, fierce reduction of elements. Get rid of stuff that's not actionable for people. Give people tools that they can actually focus on the communication, because the communication is what they're here to do. That's why they're in Outlook. So a lot of the lines are gone from all these pieces. I've left folders out there, again, because I'm a filer. If you are a piler, then this is probably not a very useful section of the screen for you. This just kind of sits over here. And so you can just click this thing over here. Now, you still have access to all those things. They're right there on the edge if you want to tap on it. And everything you're seeing me click is touch-enabled. And I'll show you that a little bit later, but I could just as easily touch any of those things, and it would expand. You'll notice I'm not doing a lot of right-clicking. So you can expand that out. But if you're on a smaller screen, if you're on a tablet, you're going to be able to go right to that, and there, you're focused on what's in your inbox. You don't have that toolbar at the top. You don't have that folder list. You want to access any of those things? All available to you, but it's just out of your way, focusing on the content of the conversation. Other things you'll notice is if I mouse over here, so if I'm over here or if I'm in touch mode, I could simply tap when the message is selected. So if I were to select, I don't know, let's pick Molly Dempsey's message here. This is actually a meeting request. But what you notice is in the highlighted one in the message list, there's a number of other icons that you see there. Now those other icons, again, are contextual actions. We chose to put the contextual actions in place where users can make use of them. So for instance, here I am, I can see flag. So if I want to say, hey, this is important, I want to flag this, I can just tap right there and flag it. If I want to delete it, I can just tap the X and delete it. You notice you don't see it on the other ones because they're not selected right now. Don't put things in front of the user that the user can't do anything with. Show people actions, we call them contextual actions. Show people actions when they can take action on them, because that's when people are going to be able to do something with it. So when something shows up and they see it, that intuitive piece that I talked about, you see the X, I want to delete it, it deletes exactly the one I'm thinking about. It's not available for the other ones because I haven't selected those. I can't do it on them. I tap on the other one, so if I go and I'll tap on my screen, you can't see, but just trust me. That other one's selected, I can go make the same decisions there. So I get my choice on each of these things of what I want to do. Now I want to show you one other thing that we've done around this, and that's this button up here. This is touch mode, as you can see. So I'm going to tap this to show you what this looks like. So we go into touch mode, and you've noticed some other changes that have happened here. So touch mode, we have your quick actions bar, and that's the bar over on the right-hand side of the screen. So if you're wondering why it's on the right-hand side of the screen, I encourage you to, you got it right there. Put your hands up as if that's your tablet and you just figured it out, that's right there for your thumbs. Those are the actions you're most likely to take when working on a message, and those are right next to your hand if you're holding a tablet that your thumb can hit. You want to delete it, you want to file it, you want to flag it. All those things are right there for you to take action on, and they're placed at the spot where you're most likely to be touching it. If you're on a desktop, maybe you don't want that, so you don't put it in touch mode. You can be in desktop mode, it works fine. We give you the flexibility, we give your users the flexibility to choose what works for them. The other thing that you can do is our bar down here. So if we take a look at the options for, here, you can see that we've had these options. These options are always down here. You're probably pretty used to those that you've seen. But you'll notice that they're much larger now. And they're much larger now because you can tap on them. If you want to, and I'm not going to do it because I want to show you another feature in a second, but if you want to, you can collapse those down. So if you remember, there can be small icons or large icons. You can make those small or large there. And by making them small or large, you can choose, again, what the experience people have are. Anyone ever use the Today bar? Anyone remember the Today bar? A few of you? So we've taken away because we found that not that many people used it. We found there's some people use it, some people really like it. If you want to recreate it, you can just right-click on those, and you can add what you want over to the Today bar. You just pin those things in, and it will show up on the right side, just like you were used to in previous versions of Outlook. So you'll notice previous versions of Outlook used to have a calendar down the right-hand side, all that, and that's not here. Again, that reduction of elements. If you want that, it's really easy. You can just right-click, you can add it over there. And so you can create the experience you want. We've spent a lot of time making this as customizable as you want for a user's experience. So one of the other things that I wanted to show you was the OA experience. I still got a lot more to show you here, but it's important that I show you the two pieces of this. If I go over, and we're looking at OA now. So one of the things you'll notice is OA looks a lot more like Outlook. We've spent a lot of time following the Win 8 design patterns. So when you think about what the new Windows 8 style is, making something that's attractive to people, it's the same logic that you saw for all the stuff that we did in Outlook in terms of giving people contextual-based actions, but making these things look as much as they can like each other and people interact with them. We spent a lot of time on things like pictures, too. You'll notice the pictures show up. Basically, this pulls from the gal. How many people put pictures into the gal? Not too many yet. That when you put pictures in the gal, and even if you have a picture as part of your contacts, so if you have your personal contacts, you have it, the picture will show up there, and that's just about personalization. That's what people like to see. I can tell you I've done this a lot in meetings. I'm in a meeting, and I want to know who on earth is that person sitting across the table because I don't know who they are, and I'll just go and I'll take a look at the meeting request, see who's there, see who the pictures are. It helps me understand who they are. About personalizing the communication, about making those show up everywhere. We've done a lot around contacts, and I'll get to contacts a little later to show you all the stuff we've done to really bring in your contacts experience into your Outlook interactions. So this, I just wanted to show you, we'll get back to OA a little bit later, but I just wanted to show you the experience as we're talking about the inbox and show you that these things are really very similar, and that's by design so that you can have an experience that is set up for users to go from one experience to another, whether they're at home, whether they're in a browser, and have something that feels familiar to them, that gives them the experiences they want to have, and let them do what they want to do. So let me go back to Outlook. And sorry, since I'm one of these people that spends a lot of time in desktop mode, I'm going to bring those back because they make me feel more comfortable. But again, choosing the experience that's right for you. Now, some of the other things that I wanted to show you is I'm going to reply to one of these messages. So send reply, and let's see. And let's say I get this far through the message, and then someone distracts me. So I'm off, and I'm doing something else. Say I'm doing a presentation. So how many have had that experience where you're in the middle, you write an email, you're in the middle of an email, and you get distracted, pulled out to a meeting, somebody calls, you have to do something else? Anyone else had that experience? I have it all the time. And then how many of you have forgotten that you didn't actually send that mail and that it's sitting in your drafts folder and have not sent it? Yes, I've had that experience a lot. And thought about how do we make that better for people? Because it's not that you didn't want to not send the message, you just hadn't finished it, you got distracted, something else pulled you away. Well, you'll notice as soon as I switched away, right in front of that message, it put up that orange drafts indicator. So the drafts indicator is about, now you saw two things there. One, you saw the inline reply. You'll notice it didn't pop out a separate window. You don't have a separate window, so you don't have this thing where you go down to Outlook at the bottom of the screen, you click on it, and there's like 7 windows that are open. You hover over each one until you find the one that was the mail you were writing. Had that experience? I have. So one, you don't have these 1,000 mails that are set that way. Two, you've got that drafts indicator. And if I go and I hop over to my OA experience, you'll notice it's there too, because it's synced between the two. Again, talking about that experience and that portability of that experience, that since OA is connected to the same information all up on Exchange, it identifies, hey, that draft is there. And so you can start, and if I go here and I click on this message, I can continue editing. If I continue editing, again, inline editing, just like I talked about before, same set of experiences. I can go and I can edit in here, and I can finish that mail if I want to. So just for the sake of making this easy, I'm going to send this. Pager will get a half-finished email. You'll notice conversation view here. I talked about earlier. Now you can see there's a message above the message that was there. That message there because it's now part of that conversation. It keeps those communications together. So it's important that we keep all those pieces together. And once Outlook does a sync, it'll move from there. But the drafts indicator and that inline reply gives us two things. The inline reply keeps you from having that huge swath of messages that are just collected there, and you're like, which one of these that I've done? It also keeps you from ending in that situation where I call the drafts dilemma, where you're stuck and you didn't realize that you didn't reply, that it's still sitting in your drafts folder. And I'll do that sometimes. I'll go into my drafts folder and be like, okay, what's in here? What are the things that I've forgotten to finish? And I go and I finish those messages, usually much later than I originally intended to. And that's one of the things that we wanted to solve for people. And this is just simply an easy visual reminder. Again, making it easy for you to do the things you wanted to do. You see it's a draft, you went ahead and you said, oh, I still haven't finished that. So I go in and I can finish that message. So I would leave my inbox. If you use your inbox as a to-do list, do people do that? I do that. And that's how since I'm a filer, everything that's in my inbox, if it's still in my inbox, I still need to act on it. And so having that draft indicator tells me, okay, I've started this, but I haven't finished it. And we're making that easy for people to make that distinction, to go and do that. Now, I'm going to create a new message here. How many people familiar with mail tips? There's a few of you? Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of different things. So if I add, in this case, I'm going to, let's say, let's call this personnel info, and I'm spelling it wrong. Spell checker in the subject line is also one of my favorite pieces. And we'll send this to adam@evil.com, which I'm sure somebody owns, and that would be a bad thing. So someday I'm going to have to try and register one of those domains just for fun. So I'm going to go in here, and I've got my message, and I'm going to take this customer info piece here. So if I drag that in here, and I'll say, so this is just an evil. Now, there's two things that have happened in this particular email message that are probably of concern. One is I'm sending to an external party, right? And that's kind of the first thing of I may want to be aware. And the second thing is that I've attached something, and if I'm going to open up this attachment so you can see what's there. And if we look at it, there is credit card information in here. So these aren't real credit cards. Just figure out, I'll state that I went on the internet and just looked up two numbers. I typed in credit card numbers, and whatever was the first thing that came out of a Russian site, I gave a credit card to. But so I put in some things that match what a credit card looks like. And you can see it highlighted here. And it's popped up with two pieces of information for me. Now there's a mail tip, and the mail tip is telling me I'm sending to someone outside my organization. Mail tips pop up with all sorts of things. If you're sending to someone outside your organization, if you're sending to a distribution list that has a lot of people on it, it'll pop up. You can set custom ones if you want. And those are just going to warn people about messages they're sending. It's kind of, think of it as the early warning system of, you may be about to do something really dumb. Are you sure you want to do it? And their warnings. Now, you also notice a policy tip, which is the first one up here. And that's the sensitive information. Now, it'll look for that same information in the context of an email, but we go beyond that. We actually look within the contents of attachments. So in this case, I have a rule set up through DLP, and it's going in and it's saying, hey, we shouldn't be sending around things like credit card numbers. And so when it sees something that has that in it, it highlights it. It tells me, hey, this is the bad information. You shouldn't be sending that. And it depends what your rights are within an organization. You can define, there's Steve Chu's doing a session later on today that talks about DLP, that will talk about all the different rules that you can set around that. I just want to kind of show you the concept of it. But when I talked about users are going to choose experiences, you're going to control data. And IT, if you're thinking about controlling that data, this is the kind of thing you can do. You can say, hey, you've got an attachment that has information here, whether it be social security numbers or credit card numbers, or you can set it up, and it's a regular expression, so you could set it up for personal identifiers or government IDs or whatever is important, or the data that you deal with within your organization that shouldn't be moved around. You can identify that. You can even go beyond that to go in and say, what we call the break glass scenario of, let's say that it's actually my job to send this, so I'm not supposed to send it to evil.com, but maybe I'm supposed to send it to someone internally. So I'll change this to Garth. So I'm supposed to send this to Garth. So in this case, you'll notice that it changed. So it's not someone outside the organization, so it doesn't warn me about that anymore. And it's now not saying that I can't send it. It's now saying, hey, maybe I shouldn't do it, but I can override that. And so if it is part of my job to do it, I can do that. But then you as an administrator also have an audit trail. You know that they affirmatively chose to do it, and you can choose which users you allow to do that or don't allow. So you can say people, say in the Human Resources Department, are able to deal with personnel data, but they have to affirmatively choose that they're sending this data. So this helps good users do the right thing. If they're looking at it and you're saying you want them not to do it, this is warning them, hey, is this really what you want to do? If you want to, you can click this. Know that we're going to keep track that you did this. If it's part of your job, that shouldn't worry you at all. If it's not part of your job, maybe you don't want to do that. So we give you the control over those things. You'll also notice the mail tip up here says that Garth's out of the office. We do things like tell you that someone's out of the office before you send the mail, rather than waiting that it comes back, and then you send it to whoever they tell you should be sending the mail to. So giving you access to do things like that. We also do some other stuff. I'll show you this one. So one of our new ones is so in this case, I am meaning to send Garth a mail, but I have, of course, forgotten my attachment. So we realized that you meant to send it, and we're like, hey, maybe you meant to attach something and you forgot to do it. Anyone ever send something and then send the follow-up mail, actual attachment attached? I've done that. And this is an easy way to say, hey, it looks like you meant to send something here. Are you sure? And if you indeed didn't want to, you can send anyways. I can say, no, this is doing what I want. Oh, I forgot it. You can just drag it in. Makes it real easy. So, yes? So the question was, what triggered that? How did it know that I meant to send an attachment? And the answer is, it saw that the word attachment was in there, and it'll look for things. If you mention the word attachment, if you say that there's a file in this email, it'll look for common ways that you would express within whatever your native language is that there should be a file associated with this email. That's how it knows. So, yes.
Does Microsoft provide a sort of a starting point with these regular expressions, or do you have to sort of start building them yourself?
So the question is, do we provide you any guidance with creating these DLP rules, or do we simply just point you to here's a document and go ahead and build? So there's a whole session on this later on at Steve's to answer your question. Yes, we provide a set of templates that match to some of the more common things that people are likely to want to track or to keep control over. And then there's also documentation on how you can create your own. And there's also a third-party plugin structure. So if you're an organization that works in security pieces, or you have, say, country-specific ones that aren't listed as part of the default, that people can actually write that as a package and actually sell those to organizations as rules that they can use to help comply with whatever the appropriate regulations are for that organization. So we do all of them. We aim to please. So hop back to Outlook here. One of the other things I want to show you is peaks. So all the time, I end up going to my calendar, and I'm saying, someone calls me up and they say, hey, are you available for lunch today? Or, maybe they're not within the organization, because then I would tell them just go look at my calendar availability, nice and easy. But someone calls me up, or are you available, or can you meet, whatever, and I have to click over to my calendar to see it. So one of the new things we have are peaks. So by mousing over any of these items that I have at the bottom here, you can see a calendar. And that calendar, it's actually interactive. So I can click on whichever day I want, and it'll show you whatever's left in that day in your appointments. And you can select, and it's not just this month. If they want to see what's next month, I can look at whatever month I want. I can also pin it there if I want, so I can pin it and make it static if I always want to have that calendar view available. But again, giving you quick, easy access to the things you want to do. They're just right there. The same is true with people. So you can see your people list. You can do a search. So if I wanted to search for someone in particular, say Bonnie, it'll bring up all the Bonnies. So it's very easy, and I can go right from there. If I want to send them an email, I can go in and you have your standard hover card. And this is the new contact card, and you can see that you get access to all the information. I can schedule a meeting if I'm hooked into Link, or if I'm in any other thing that plugs into Outlook. You can see presence, and you can do IM and phone calls, all the things you're used to within this. One of the interesting things you'll notice, though, is Profile here lists two things. So you see Outlook contacts, you also see Link contacts, because the environment that I'm connected to is connected to those two. Now, we listed here, it says people. It doesn't say contacts, and that was an important shift, because I have a drawer full of contact cards, which is funny because first thing I do is I take it and I connect with the person on LinkedIn, and then I stuff the card in the drawer and I never look at it again. Because LinkedIn for me is the service that I use to manage my contacts, how people can find me, it's how I find people. Some people use Facebook, some people use Zing, some people rely on their local contacts, some people use the gal within the company. So any one of these could be used, and indeed many people will use multiples of them. For me, I use about 4 of them. And so in this case, I've got Outlook pulling in from Link and from the Outlook contacts itself. But you can connect this up, and because of the environment that I'm in right now, I'm not connected to the net, so I can't directly connect it to pull in things like the LinkedIn contacts, although I'll show you a different part of how we connect with LinkedIn. But you can connect in all those things, and what it'll do is it'll pull that data from all those different networks. So in this case, you're seeing 2 from Outlook with Link and Outlook itself, but you could also see LinkedIn, you could see Facebook, you can see wherever you want to connect to, because it's really just one person. Bonnie's one person. I may have her as several different contacts from several different locations, and maybe one of them I've got her home address, maybe another one I've got her cell phone number, maybe another I have her work phone number, her fax number, her business address, maybe the personal contact card that I have has her picture. Like, I can have all these different pieces of information, but it's still one person. So how many of you have a contact that you have the same person who shows up multiple times in your contacts? I think before I had this feature, since this feature doesn't actually, it doesn't aggregate them, it aggregates the view. So your contacts are still kept separate, but the view is unified. So some people, I think the worst one I have is 7. And it's just, looking through them to find which one is the person's personal phone number so I can send them a text message. That's always my big challenge, is which one of it is it? This is meant to solve that problem, because you have one, and it's going to show you all the different pieces of contact information that you want for that person. You've got one view, because it's one person. You may have many contacts, but one person. And so this gives you that unified view, and you can connect into those other networks in order to fill in that information. You'll notice, it's the person card, as we call it, has a lot more friendly layout and look. The final version, just for your own awareness, will not have the happy face, much as I love it. That's more of that's a feedback mechanism we have at Microsoft, since this is pre-release software. The other thing you'll notice down here at the bottom of the message, how many people use the Outlook Social Connector? Some of you? So for those of you who aren't using the Outlook Social Connector, that's essentially what this piece is here. And I haven't filled up this, Kurt Koenigsbauer's not going to list a lot of information. He's our VP, so he's not too filled into all this. But what you can see is you can see all the mail that you've had with them, any attachments, meetings. You have all the different pieces of information you have with them. And then you can choose how big the pictures that you have connected to those people are. You can also take a look at, how many of you are familiar with the new plugin model that we have? A couple of people. So in this case, we have some kind of user data that we've put up in the cloud just to kind of give you an example of these things. So the social connector gives you the ability to connect to most of the social networks that you think about and be able to bring in contact information for those people and have that in Outlook. The plugin that you see plugs in at the server and gives you access across your experiences. Whether you're in Outlook or Outlook web app, you're going to get those experiences and pull in and see that data. Now, the new plugin model, here's LinkedIn. I'll show you one other that give you an example of how these different pieces work together. Where's I think I may have accidentally moved the message. Did you guys see? I forget if Michael showed the Bing one. Bing Maps, that if there's an address, again, when we talked about the attachment one, that we do some intelligence in looking at, basically, you can set up keyword identifiers. It's the same engine that looks for spam, essentially, in your inbox, that we look for key identifiers. If you have an address, we'll identify an address. And then at the top here, like in this case, there's people that are connected to this message, so since every email will have people, LinkedIn shows up. But you can also have things like an address, and if you have an address, then it'll say Bing Maps. And with Bing Maps, you can go and you get an interactive map of that location. And this is a pluggable model, so before I talk about writing COM and the challenges in going and writing COM, and if you want to, you get a very rich model, but it takes a fairly seasoned developer. All this is run in JavaScript. It's JavaScript and HTML as the program model for these things. You can go to dev.office.com today and take a look at the code there. As an IT pro, of course, we've made sure that you have complete control in these things, so if you are using plugins like this, there's 3 ways that you can access them. You can either access them by URL, you can access them by uploading a file, or you can access them from an online store that we make available. As an IT pro, you have control of all of these. So you can choose to turn any of them on or off. It's completely up to you. So you can choose which ones are pre-installed for your users and show up for them in your Outlook web app experience and your Outlook experience. You can choose which ones they can install, which ones they can't install. So you will always maintain control of your environment, and that's one of the things we always focus on. Giving you the control of the data in the environment, but giving you an easy way to extend that. If you want to write something, now you can take web development skills and extend powerful things like Outlook in your communications environment rather than having to go much deeper, and you can have that experience across your experiences. And that's the same for the whole Office stack, that set of HTML and JavaScript programming tools are going to be able to write apps for mail apps for Outlook. You can write apps for Word, Excel, PowerPoint, SharePoint, all of those experiences. So if I covered that. The last thing I wanted to jump over to is calendar work. So if we take a look at the calendar, you should be pretty familiar with the Outlook calendar. No surprise there. You will notice a couple of changes. Things like the weather bar up at the top. So you now have the ability to see the weather. You can customize it. You can choose what cities. Obviously, Seattle, Washington, probably less relevant for the folks in this room than for me. But you can also do that. You can change, obviously, if it's in centigrade or Fahrenheit, but just an easy way to get the access to the information you want. So when you're taking a look at looking at something, you can book it and put it right in there. The other things, I'll show you kind of one of the neat kind of touch-enabled pieces is you can just kind of pinch to zoom to get in and out of these things. You get the access to the information the way you want to see it. And if you go over, if I hop over to OA, and I'll show you the OA calendar. The OA calendar is, this is, of course, the same person that we're looking at. And we've done a bunch of stuff here to bring it more in parity with what you're used to in Outlook. So if you want to be able to print or you want to be able to share the calendar, it's really easy. That reduction of elements, again, we don't give you a giant thing with a ton of different options. Fill in the information you want to fill in. If there's more information that we need after you do it, then we'll prompt you for that. But the goal, again, is to make it easy and intuitive. Printing from OA, how many people have to print from OA? A few of you. We always get this request. We've had it for a number of years, the number of versions people want to be able to print from OA. Printing from the web provides a certain set of challenges because a web page doesn't necessarily know what your local printer settings are and how to be able to speak to that and where you're at. And so we added that in order to be able to print calendar sharing. Like I said, I showed you. And one of the things that we did is you can also do multiple calendars. You can view multiple calendars at one time. And what I wanted to show you is something we call the Mojenda view. And just kind of one of the internal names we use. And that's because we basically took the month and the agenda and we put them together. And so you have the same kind of view on the left-hand side of your week as you'd expect it. And you have all the different, you can see your month because how many people use week view as their standard view? How many people use month view? Okay, so I'm like most of you folks. I use week view because I have 25, 30 meetings a week. And so you need to keep track of it. And that's the view that we have. Most users actually use month view. Because they have many fewer appointments than most of us have. And so we want to make sure that this is applicable for each of the people. For week view, we see the agenda in the week. We see it there, and that makes sense, because that's what we want to do. In a month view, obviously that's not going to work for you. You're going to have 1 or 2 things a day. Our goal here is I can pick a day, and I can see all the things that are happening that day. So I can see the day, and I can see my month, but I can also see in any day that I've picked, what are all the items that I need to do on that particular day. And so we call it the mixing of agenda and the overall month. That's the Mojenda that we talked about. So that's kind of a quick run through of a lot of the different changes that we've done with Outlook. Unfortunately, I'll hop back to the decks. So kind of wrapping this up, I talked to you about Outlook and thinking about Outlook beyond just the desktop experience. The desktop is a great experience. I love it. I use it every day. I realize that users use not only desktops, but web browsers, mobile devices, tablets, and making sure that you have a great Outlook experience no matter what you're accessing on is one of the goals and how we think about these things. And so we've gone ahead and created a great Outlook experience for all the ways that people are going to access the information. I've also shown you probably about 3/4 of the new stuff that I wanted to show you. We're simply limited on time. There's a lot of stuff. If you don't have the new Outlook, if you haven't gone and downloaded it yet, please go to preview.office.com, download a free sign up for an Office 365 account. It's free. Download it. You can try out the click to run. You can see it come stream right away down. You can start using it right away. Try it out. Notice all the stuff that I showed you. You're going to run into a bunch more stuff that I think you'll really love. I would love your feedback on any piece of it. Both at the end of this session, I think there's upcoming content. I'll spare you that. You have copies of that. But please fill out your session evaluation forms. I would appreciate that. One, as a speaker, that helps me get better. Please let me know what I do well, what I haven't done well. Two, you can also find my email address. If you have any feedback or questions about Outlook, you can come speak to me afterwards, or I really do value your input. If you don't get a chance to talk to me, if you have to run off to another session, please send me an email. I may take me a week or two to get back to it, but I promise it will be in my inbox until I reply to you. Because that's my big focus is creating great products for you and your users. It's what I spend my life doing, quite literally, and your feedback is very important to me. And so if you have things that you like, things that you'd like to see, things that you want to know why we did something the way they are, reach out to me. I promise you I'll get back to you. Also, if the pure feel-good nature of communicating with the folks at Microsoft building it aren't enough, you can also be entered in a chance to win fabulous prizes from our friends here at TechEd. And so please take the opportunity to do that. With that, I will open it up to questions. If anyone has any questions about Outlook, I'd be glad